as all others, I've been invited to speak about the sustainable finance, and eventually the term changed into the breaking point. So let me unite those two topics, since I believe that sustainability is still very important. In sustainable finance, we have many instruments, and money is just one of them. But what is sustainable money? A watch is sustainable when it keeps showing the time. A house is sustainable when it keeps warmth and harmony inside it. Money is sustainable when it keeps its main character, scarcity. And here we come to a very challenging discussion, since we all want money to be plentiful. We want more money to be given by bankers. Bankers want to give us more money. But if money would lose scarcity, there would be nothing to allocate. There would be no measurement. There would be no way to set up values and to exchange. So scarcity is truly an most important feature of currency. And the last years showed us an extreme historical case of how our approach to money has changed. At the beginning of the pandemic, the central bank has declared that it is abolishing all the limits that were set up before that, and central bank started to do open market operations, buying state securities and the EU securities up to 30 years of maturity, and the amount was so tremendous that according to ECB itself, it amounted to 15.5% of the GDP of the whole Eurozone. So it was really a huge amount of money coming not simply to the market, but mainly to the state treasuries, to those new generation funds, and so on. So when we start speaking about redistribution, which happens through these inflationary processes, of course we have to admit that the first winners of redistribution when inflation already happens are those who are closer to the new issue of currency. So all the treasuries, projects which were supported by these funds, banking institutions as well, but and also enterprises which have bigger wealth, can have bigger collateral, can borrow more with a lower interest rates. Of course, they will have bigger leverage of capital retain. But life is not just one-way direction. So among those enterprises, there will be those which will experience inflation as a gap between the producer prices and the consumer prices. And as we know, in the European Union, already for several months, we experience 30% of producer price increase, and the consumer prices are the highest in Lithuania and in Estonia, but in other countries, they're still pretty moderate, I would say, in comparison to ours, which means that the producers are under the huge pressure. They have to buy much more expensive, but they're not sure if they will be able to sell as expensive. And those who are now responding to the growing demand and investing into the new projects, even if they have very good credit conditions from the bank, they are not sure if they will be able to sell their final products after 3 or 4 years of the investment cycle at the price which will make the whole project efficient. So I should remind that the ECB, when they started this massive operation, they had one basic purpose: to stimulate the demand and consumption. So the huge spread that we see now between the demand and the supply of the resources is showing that the central bank quite succeeded in stimulating the demand, and it made it very quickly. But the real industry needs time to respond, to catch up with this demand. It is even more interesting if we look at the shortage of labor. Of course, I should mention that when we speak about shortage of resources, of course there were breakdowns in the supply chains, there were lockdowns in several industries, which really made the situation worse. But would it not be for this massive injection of money all around the globe? It was not just the ECB which issued money, but also other central banks. Of course, we would not have this overall and constant increase of prices. Some prices would go up, some prices would go down. The going up would be temporary, but now we really have this steady, constant increase of a universal level of prices. And it is even more interesting if we look at this labor shortage. Of course, we all in Lithuania experience shortage of people of all professions, of all talents. But it's not unique in Lithuania. Unemployment levels are very low in Scandinavia, in UK, in US. Unemployment of around 5% means actually full employment. And everywhere there is a huge shortage of people. And we could come to an interesting explanation that governments did not learn yet how to clone people quickly. We cannot catch up with this, instant injection of money into the market, so we cannot catch up with the cloning of people. We cannot produce energy as quickly as money has been produced. And thus we have this huge gap which will continue to remain. Even when the central bank will lower the interest rates, and the open market operations will be limited in scope, still, of course, there will be the remainance of the open market operations, and of course, the promises to support the next generation funds are still in place. So there will still be injections of money into that sector of our society, I would say, which invests into public green projects. Also, it means redistribution between the private sector economy and this public project. Huge redistribution, and economic logic suggests that the first will get the biggest benefit, and the last who will get the money when they become already cold, when the prices are already up, those will be the losers. And of course, mainly those are people who live on a fixed income, who do not have wealth, who did not acquire houses yet. So for them, this situation will be the most difficult. Now, this crowding out effect of the resources of course reminds us of what else could be done And I really liked colleague Marius from the central bank when he spoke about all this complexity of state regulations which were ever growing in the pandemic years. So what else could be done to respond to the situation, to respond to the crisis? And if we look at least on this green energy sector, we will find out a lot of regulations which make private investment very prolonged in time. It is difficult to acquire all the permissions, licenses, and so on. So if we could shorten the route of a private investment towards a wind farm or sun batteries, it will really help people to achieve their aims quicker. And what is most important, that in this case, we really rely on the private initiative of people, on people's will to do this transfer to the sustainable way of life. The more we rely on public redistribution and public grants and planning, the more we get locked into bureaucratic procedures, and as colleagues already mentioned, the less efficient is the result. Sometimes even the aims could be questionable. So what we see, we reallocate a big portion of our resources towards sectors which are inefficient, questionable, but will be financed first of all. And so we are crowding out resources from the private sectors, people's initiatives, which would really allow us to reach those aims in a harmonic way, in benefiting all the society. So what the war in Ukraine teaches us several questions. We in Lithuania have cancelled all the regulations allowing Ukrainians to enter Lithuania and also to enter the labor market in Lithuania without any restrictions. Ukrainians themselves have changed their tax system. For example, they have completely abolished the corporate profit tax, and now there is only 2% of turnover tax operating in Ukraine, and some other major cuts have been done in Ukraine, which means that in a time of such a turmoil, we as humanity, we really need an instant action. But do we really rethink all our policies? Do the Germans consider seriously closing down nuclear plants still, notwithstanding all the situation? Do we as a EU reconsider our agricultural policy, our customs policy, looking at all that lies ahead of us in these food supplies and so on? Do we really cut our bureaucracies? And the problem is that the more complex they are, the more difficult it is to wisely and consistently, revise them. And so they become really such a block in humanity's need to respond really quickly. So here I come to my closing note. Ladies and gentlemen, it looks that our generation will not be able to avoid the same calamities, the same challenges as generations before had. So our main lesson is to be able to address and to act instantly, and not just by instant printing of money, because this kind of a response has really dangerous and long-term outcomes for all of us. So the easiness by which we can solve the problems instantly through the money channel may become an illusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.